Okay. All right, here we go.
All right.
All right, welcome back to Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. This is the post-game edition. The Bears and the Raiders. The Raiders go to Chicago and, frankly, stink up the joint. They lose 30-12 to Tyson Bagent. Tyson Bagent, Division II quarterback, making his first NFL start, and he outshines the Raiders and leads the Bears to their first home win in over a year. So the Raiders setting records, and just not the ones that all of you out there in Raider Nation would like them to set. But it's a sad state what happened today. And to do this with me today, to talk to us, and of course we always start with, on these post-game shows, the voice of the fan, and that of course is my good friend Murf from Raiders Fan Radio. And Murf is gonna. Wait, hold on. I lost his name. There he is. There's Murf with his Fire Josh McDaniels bag over his head. That tells you where he's at. And Patrick Graham. There you go. And again, we always give the voice of the fan this first out of the gate segment because we want to get the pure emotion and reaction of all of you out there with Murf to start with. Okay, Murf, lay it on me. Get on your soapbox. And go, sir.
All right. So, I can't give you the completely unfiltered version because we have a family listening audience out there, right? And so I don't want to be dropping F-bombs and everything else on this show. But like, at what point can you embarrass yourself any further? Like this, and I really always want to temper my criticism of the Raiders by saying that, like, it's a lot of times I don't necessarily want to call out players because players are doing the best based on what positions they're being put in. But my gosh, this coaching staff is a effing failure. It's an abysmal failure from top to bottom at this point. And it all starts with Josh McDaniels. And even in talking about Patrick Graham, like, listen, I'm not a film guy. I'm not a tape guy, but I know enough about this damn sport and this team after watching them for 50 freaking years to pick up on some stuff. And to all the casual Twitter people that are like, oh yeah, Murf, what adjustments would you make? Because you're such a good coach. I don't know. Quit putting Max Crosby in a wide 9 where he's got to run freaking 7 yards before he makes contact with a guard or with the tackle. And then while the Bears are just pounding the rock inside. And then when they do decide to kick him in, we don't have anybody in the secondary that can freaking tackle. How about another one? How about on 1st and goal from the 4-yard line? Yeah, let's pitch it out and make Josh Jacobs run 12 yards in order to get back get to the goal line, 8 yards to get to the freaking line of scrimmage. It's bullshit. It's so sorry. It's so stupid. Okay. It's so stupid. Like we watch these things unfold, and it's like with our most layman of eyes, we can see these. We talk about body language all the time. Uninspired body language and a completely uninspired team. Marcus Peters, you want to make contact at all ever? Like, listen, I'm not trying to like call people out on stuff, but like, man, you're an NFL football player and you can't make a tackle. Like when you got a guy face up, you're just going to freaking olay him and let him whiff you. Like, I don't get it, man. And seeming to me, and that's where like when the pride of things starts to drop, when the regression is happening, that's gosh darn coaching. And listen, Mark, look, I know that you want us to smarten up and I will always have the back of Mark Davis. All of those of you that are out there like, oh, sell the team, blah, blah, blah. It ain't ever going to happen. Mark Davis is the biggest Raider fan in the world, and it's his father's legacy, and he's going to continue to own this football team. It's not going anywhere. But what I will say, though, is that it's time for Mark, again, just like he did with Jack Del Rio when we got embarrassed against the freaking Chargers in a soccer stadium. It's time to freaking pull the cord on this thing. That's it. We're done. Like, what else do you want to see? It's time to make some serious changes at the top, and hopefully that will roll downhill and give these guys something to be inspired about, man, because we got some dogs on this football team. We have some talent on this football team, and they're not worth a crap because we want to look at the way that they're set up, man. It's so unfortunate. The personnel decisions are ass. The coaching on the field is ass. The clock management is ass. Oh, let's kick another field goal. Let's make it a 6. Let's get it to 6. Why? What's the freaking point? Do you not know how scoring unfolds in the NFL? Your defense can't stop anything, and you're just going to give the Bears another long-ass possession? I just don't get it, Scott. There's nothing about it is making sense to me anymore. And all the goodwill that they had over the back-to-back wins, they pissed that all away. It's gone. See ya. All that goodwill is completely gone because you lost to one of the worst teams in football. Well, guess what? Now that means we're one of the worst teams in football. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and Murph, I feel you on that one. And I saw a lot of fans during the game talking about that. And from my perspective, I look at it this way. And I said this towards the end of the game in a post, and that was, you're 24 games into Josh McDaniels' coaching reign. And this team is worse than the team he inherited. Now, a lot of people talk about, he inherited a playoff team. It's true. Now, they got lucky to make the playoffs this year, but they made the playoffs. They were doing things. They had talent. They had players. A lot of those players have now been run out of the organization. We've talked many times on this show that I didn't have a problem with them switching a quarterback. The quarterback they went to, obviously a mistake, but I didn't disagree with some of the changes. But you have to ask yourself, it's sort of, when all the presidential elections come around, what do all the candidates use, especially if they're going against an incumbent? They always say, are you better off 4 years ago than you today than you were then? And I think if you look at the Raiders and you say, hey, are you better off than you were when Josh McDaniels took over after Rich Bisaccia finished his interim gig? Are you better off today than you were then? I would not be able to find, I don't think anybody, even impartial folks in the media, people who cover the team that aren't on a side, unlike the fans, who would say to me, yeah, they're in a better position. How are they in a better position? Are they better at wide receiver? Yes, but does that help you win ball games? No. And this is an important point, and I want to get your comment on this, Murph, because I know you talked about Mark Davis, and I think he gets a bad rap on one side of it, but on another side of it, he ultimately is responsible. In a loss like this, a team going in this direction where they can't find consistency, they can't find their own identity, they can't coach themselves out of a box, it goes to the top. The decision makers here are responsible. Now, what's Mark Davis going to do about this? He's got his parade tomorrow for his WNBA team. Congratulations to them. But as far as his football team goes, it's not in good shape. It's sick. The patient is getting sicker. It's not getting better. And so you have to look to him ultimately, and Dave Ziegler too, who's responsible for this. You have to look at them, and there has to be responsibility taken here. And there has to be some sort of recognition, I view, that it's just not working as it is.
Yeah, and I think that it's hard for Mark because he's got to put his pride aside on to make that big of a move, because it's an admission of failure, and which is, by all intents and purposes, it is. And again, I'm not calling the man out, but I'm calling the decision out at this point. When we can look at it, and I know hindsight's always 20/20, but when we look at what Rich Bisaccia and even Mike Mayock to an extent were doing with this football team and how they were inspired, and yes, they squeaked into the playoffs and needed some things to go in their favor, but the bottom line is that they were playing inspired football. We haven't seen inspired football since we beat the Chargers. You could argue that Bengals game that we lost in the playoffs. But anyways, the point being though is that I feel like Mark, and this is where I understand. I feel like he will self-acknowledge and tell you, I'm not a football guy. I'm not my dad. His dad was, the guy that created all this stuff. So it's hard to follow in those kinds of footsteps, right? It's anybody of us that would never expect him to be an Al Davis, and he admits that idea. So that said, I think he's made decisions in order to take himself out of the football operations department. And the most glaring example of that is giving the keys to the kingdom to John Gruden. That's what he was doing. He was giving it all away. Like, you and Mike go and do all the football stuff. I'll just build a business. And so you ask whether the Raiders better off at now than we were a couple years ago. They're wealthier. Like when you look at that, right? Like the Raiders have become one of the highest value franchises. So the business side of the Raiders is good. The football side of the Raiders is terrible. And I think that if I'm only a knucklehead podcaster in my bonus room. I don't know shit. And I'm not trying to tell Mark Davis what to do with his football team or do with his money or anything else. But I would say this as an outside observer, it's time to look and find someone that can be your VP of football operations and let them handle all this stuff so that if you got to make a tough decision on firing a coach or whatever else, you don't have to do it, Mark. Let somebody else have that role and that responsibility. And I know the Broncos are ass right now too, but like when you look at the way that were structured, when the Bidwells kind of turned over operations to John Elway and said, here, John, you run the football team, you handle all this stuff. And John Elway is the one that is making the day-to-day decisions for the Broncos. So that's the kind of the model that I'm thinking. Is that Tom Brady? Is that what we're kind of working our way into? I don't know, but I think that might be a good idea to get someone in there that is just 100% can be the football brain, and just that way Mark can just do Mark stuff. And again, I never begrudge the guy because he has such a passion for this football team. No one on the planet wants the Raiders to win more than Mark Davis. So the idea of like sell the team and like whatever, like that's just a ridiculous sentiment to me. So, but I think that would be healthy to bring someone else into where he doesn't have to sweat it.
But here's the thing, and I hear what you're saying, Murph. My point here is that with Mark Davis making the decisions, and I don't disagree with you that, hey, give somebody who knows what they're doing the keys to the football car, so to speak, right? And if you do that, that's your general manager. That is Dave Ziegler. Now, you can argue that he has not done a great job thus so far. I think there's a pretty good argument there as well.
And Dave's not going to fire his best friend. So maybe that was a mistake there.
That could be a mistake, but also, I mean, I go back to the coaching situation because that's the most, to me, we'll get into these issues with structure in the team franchise, the overall structure as well. But when you look at the coaching situation, and again, I don't care if people in the chat think that I'm trying to stay in the middle by not saying fire somebody. I don't tell people to fire people. I just tell you what I see. And I see a coach that has not improved his team. I see a coach that does not develop talent. I see a coach that has not prepared his team well enough to even compete on the road with one of the NFL's worst teams, the Chicago Bears. As I said earlier, had not won a game at home in a year, folks, okay? It's a team that the Denver Broncos came back and beat, okay? So that's just, let's lay that out there. So when you look at what Josh McDaniels has done, he has not done anything to improve the quality of this team. Not only that, but you watch the game and you see the flow of the offense. Credit the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears came out with their Division II quarterback. Oh, by the way, let me just say, we don't know exactly what Aiden O'Connell is yet, but I'm just going to make this statement. The Raiders have no NFL starting quarterback on their roster. They don't. The Bagent kid comes out of nowhere, but not only did he come out of nowhere, the Bears drew up an offensive game plan, Murph, that utilized his skill without putting too much pressure. Imagine that. Imagine taking a kid and saying, hey, we're going to make a game plan against this Raiders team who had been playing better defense against bad teams. I understand that still. They were. And we're going to put him in the position to make plays early to get him to gain confidence. And they did. The Raiders got so outcoached in this game, it's not even close. And I know I'm not a football coach, so if you're a coach out there and you tell me I'm wrong, so be it. But watching the game, I have never seen such a one-sided chess match. In fact, it was more like checkers for the Chicago Bears. Josh McDaniels, Patrick Graham, you put your bag on at the beginning of the show, Murph. Those two gentlemen, I mean, it's coaching malpractice at its worst. It was so unbelievably bad to watch that I was flipping between games and I was watching the Detroit Lions get their ass kicked, which was a surprise. But you know what? In that game, they were still calling their game. The players were still giving all they had. And I'm not saying the Raiders did have a few players I felt didn't give their best today. But I will say this, that if you don't put your position or your team in a position to win, they won't. And the Raiders coaching staff just shit the bed on this game. There's no other way to say it. 4-letter words are allowed today. I know we're a family. We'll bleep it out for the audio. But I'm just telling you, it was shit. The coaching was shit. And I feel bad for fans, but having to watch it from my perspective, it was holy hell. It was terrible.
It was embarrassing. I would even go you one further. It was tic-tac-toe, and the Bears got to go first. Unbelievable. And I'm with you. It was glaring. And even Sanchez calls it out on the broadcast about how they set up, that young man to be successful. The Bears staff I'm talking about. set him up to be successful out of the gate. And what a concept. And this is the thing that we've harped on numerous times. And I'll say it like this. I have a lot of respect for a coaching staff that can look at what they have in terms of personnel. Heck, you could even just go to and we could really make this a broad discussion and talk about leadership. When you look at your constituents, and in this case, it's a football team, you look at who you have already on the roster or who are employees or whatever else, and you come up with a strategy and a vision that takes advantage of everyone's strengths and allows everyone else to be successful sometimes in spite of your own. You want to lift those up around you to be better. What did Josh McDaniels and Patrick Graham do today? You tell me one freaking player, Raider Nation, that was put in a position to be successful. And I'm telling you, like all these weird defensive sets that they're doing when they're taking guys, they're basically like you're opening up. When we talk about that wide nine, and I understand it's about giving Max and even Tyree Wilson, it's giving them distance between them and the tackle so they can convert speed to power. I get that concept. But when you do that, when you pull those guys out so far away from the tackles, you just opened up the middle of the field, the line of scrimmage, and they're just pounding the ball. And then what happens when they bring them inside? That runner bounces outside and no one can tackle. So like it becomes, like you said, it's this outcoach, or it's this coaching competition at that point that's where I don't want to fault the players entirely. Even as much as I, jumped on Marcus Peters here right out of the gate. Is that the guy you want making tackles on the outside? No, ideally you want Spillane or somebody else out there, right?
Somebody got mad at me this week because I claimed that the Raiders, even though they were playing better defense, don't have enough talent on defense. And they were criticizing me saying, why do you say they don't have enough talent? But that's why. Because Marcus Peters at this point in his career is who he is. He's not the Marcus Peters of 7 years ago. It's just the way it is. So I see that, and I don't disagree with you, Murph. I think that part of this too goes back to the signals that a head coach sends to his team, right? So we heard a lot last week about Davante Adams complaining, and I should say he wasn't really complaining. Oh, you know what? 1 second. I'm going to take a break here real fast, folks. When we come back here on the Silver and Black Today post-game show with the YouTube chat going absolutely nuts right now. When we come back, we're going to talk that. I'm going to start with Davante Adams because I want to make sure I clear the record on that we talk about what he said, what he didn't say, and then what happened today. Because, again, I think it's a coaching malpractice issue when we come back. You're listening to Silver and Black Today, the post-game edition. Raiders 30-12 losers to the Chicago Bears. Tyson Bagent, the second division quarterback. Yes, they lose. We're coming right back after these words here. Take care. All right, welcome back to Silver and Black Today, the post-game edition. We are an Odyssey original podcast. If you don't already subscribe to the podcast on audio, even for those of you going crazy in the YouTube chat right now, please do me a favor. Go subscribe to the auto, put on the auto download. We appreciate it. And if you're watching us on YouTube, we appreciate the likes. We appreciate the subscriptions. And also make sure you hit the notifications bell so you know when we go live. Always. And we had a super chat in there too. So thank you for that. By the way, all super chats that come in, even if they're angry super chats, if they come in, any of that money goes right to the One Nation Foundation, which supports Raiders charities. And no, the Raiders payroll is not a charity at this point, although it might qualify as a nonprofit. But anyway, we'll see. But thank you guys for all being back with me and Murph from Raiders Fan Radio, who brings us the fan perspective on every post-game show. We do it a little bit differently here, so it's good to get. But I started before the break, Murph, with Davante Adams, what he said last week. A lot of people made it sound like he was being selfish. No, he was not being selfish. His point was, I just want to win. I want to be great, yes, but greatness, there's individual greatness, then there's team greatness, and sometimes they combine. That's what he was talking about. So the Raiders, in typical Josh McDaniels fashion, come out, and I think the first 4 passes or 3 passes, Davante Adams. So it's okay. So Davante Adams spoke out. So Josh McDaniels like, okay, I'm going to script it. I'm going to give you everything. And he does. And then, of course, then they move away from it. And Davante, yes, dropped what should have been a touchdown pass. It reminded me of the Foster Moreau pass on Thursday with the Saints, Derek Carr, former Raiders. Kind of reminded me a little bit of that. But anyway, so Davante Adams comes out. But again, Josh McDaniels scripts a drive, goes to his best receiver. Then past that, you just see stuff and you're like, what are you doing? Like, Brian Hoyer can't move. He can't throw the ball. And somebody made the point on x.com, Murph, and I want to get your comments on this, that Brian Hoyer is sort of like, since we're in the middle of the baseball players, sort of like a relief pitcher, right? He's the kind of, he's not a starting quarterback. When he comes in, he's the kind of guy that you want to, if somebody gets hurt, just like it happened the other day, he comes in and he finishes up for you. But he's not a starter. He's not a guy who's going to go out there and lead you throughout a whole game. And that showed again today. He has not won a game in 12 years as a starter. So the decision-making, going back to coaching, that's how I'm bringing it all around. The decision-making, look, Aiden O'Connell threw a pick today. It was a terrible throw. I'm not saying the kid wouldn't make mistakes, but would you have been worse off starting him? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it would have been 50-12. I don't know. But to me, this again shows that this coaching staff, and what you made earlier, a great point, the leadership here to me is beyond just gone. There's no leadership there. What are you saying to your team? Yeah, we're going to start this guy. We already know what he is. And, well, it gives us the best chance to win. Does it really? It didn't today, and that shone through. It showed that it was a bad decision.
Yeah, and that so going back to the Devontae comments, nothing illustrated like the failure of Josh McDaniels in-game play calling than that. Then you're right. Is he a great strategist? It's seemingly so, because we can see that the Raiders will come out, guns blazing on these opening drives and these scripted plays. But then as soon as the decision making falls into reaction, when it's time to react to what the defense is doing, whether that be the quarterback or Josh McDaniels, then that's when it all completely starts to fall apart. And there was some little bit of a mixed reaction from Raider Nation this week when Devontae came out and said those comments. But here's and you said it very well, Scott, and I would add a layer to it, even Raider Nation, that Devontae grew up a Raider fan. He gets what this Raider thing is all about. Al Davis didn't want to just win a football game. I know, just win, baby. But he said, you don't adjust, you dominate. Al Davis wanted to come out there and dominate from the get-go. So it's not about just, he also used to say, we don't want first downs, we want touchdowns. It's all about going in there and completely defeating your opponent, in the great words of John Facenda, to beat a team into which no honor could be salvaged. That's the kind of level we're talking about here. That's what Devontae's talking about. He's not talking about getting his. He's not talking about, I need to have my. No, he's talking about the idea that he's one of the best at his position. And if he's dominating, the Raiders are dominating. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference. And then when you look at squeaking by and beating a couple of bad football teams, that ain't it, man. It's fool's gold. So I think Devontae was completely, he was unselfish in his comments. And I think that they were completely on point, because he gets it. He gets what this Raider thing is all about. So I celebrate him in that. And I forget what the other points were, Scott, because I was almost so proud of.
Well, it's funny too. I want to give a shout out to Raider Ryan with a $5 super chat going to the foundation. Also, Hooligan Nation, $10. And let me find the other one. Swag Jeff with $5. So you guys, he's not sitting there with you.
No,
not
that
today.
is all. Yeah.
And I got one more in here. I gotta give a shout out. It's just the chat's going crazy. So it's like a while ago. Here it is. It is Unholy Raider fan, $2. So thank you guys for the super chat and for the One Nation Foundation donation, which is going that. By the way, Chuck Hernandez said, darn, Scott just tuned in and you look saddened. And even though I'm not the fan perspective, I had to watch that game. Who wouldn't be sad watching that game? Even if you weren't a Raiders fan, it was hard to, unless you were a Bears fan, that game was hard to watch. It was just hard to watch. The other thing too, we were talking about the offense, and we'll get to the defense in a minute because that deserves some time for sure, which is I predicted when Mo and I did our show for Thursday last week, I predicted that you would see a very heavy dose against this Bears defense of, especially I thought at that time that Aiden O'Connell would play, but even with Hoyer, I thought you would see a really steady diet of tight end play here. Now, early on, Mark Sanchez on the broadcast called it out. He said, man, they're running a lot of dual tight end plays, but they're not going to the tight ends. Yeah. And here you have Michael Mayer, the second-round draft pick, underutilized yet again. I think he had 4 targets today. A couple of them were really errant throws by Hoyer, one by O'Connell. And he's at home in Chicago. I say at home because it's a big Notre Dame town. And they don't go to him. They use the alignments. I'm watching and I'm saying, why are you having 2 tight ends out there? You're not running the ball on those plays. You're passing the ball to the slot receiver or to the outside receiver. You're not going to the tight end who are open. The whole first half, Murph, the tight ends were open and nobody would go to them. Now, some of that's on the player. Again, you have terrible, and since we're already cursing on this show, the shit quarterback play you have. Okay.
I love it.
You have, and you're not even hitting open tight ends. They're easy passes. All you have to do is hit those passes, move the sticks, move the sticks, move the sticks. The Raiders couldn't execute. And if a player doesn't execute, who's ultimately responsible? This is the coaching staff. This team came unprepared to play. And now, think about this, Murph. They have to now prepare. They get a longer week because they play on Monday night. They have to go face a Lions team that just got its ass kicked. And they're going to be mad on Monday Night Football. It's going to get worse, folks. I'm telling you.
Yeah, it's going to get ugly, and that's one of the things that we talked about a lot coming off these last two wins that we had, was that it's not going to get easy for the Raiders. That it was the idea that was that, okay, we might even have a 3-game winning streak going here, but is that something we could even feel good about? Because knowing that we've got the Lions, the Dolphins, the Chiefs twice. We've got the Jets who upset the Eagles last week. And like you said, we got especially this Lions team. Like, talk about a team that plays for their coach. There you go. Coaching one, and the Jets as well. Bob Saleh and Dan Campbell, I think, are two of the most well-respected coaches in the league right now. And I look at those guys and I wish we had one of those guys or somebody that was like that. Shout out Jeff Ulbrich too from on that Jet staff, who I'm hoping, if the Raiders do decide to make a move, that's the guy that we'll look at. That's the kind of coach we need up in silver and black. But anyways, point being though is that I'm with you, Scott. This team was absolute fool's gold off of these a couple of wins, and it's going to get real ugly. It's going to get embarrassing. And at that point, does Mark Davis finally decide to make a change? If not, again, I'm sorry, I'm scattered again. I can't remember.
Okay. No. I mean, I think you have the same.
You're the pro, and this is when you're so much better because my brain's going a million miles an hour, and all I can think about is 95 things I'm pissed off about. And like you said, it's shit. And as a fan, man, talk about being down bad, man. We're down bad.
Well, I think you're right, though. I mean, look, for fans, and you're expressing, I think, what I'm seeing in the chat on YouTube, by the way, is exactly how I think these folks are feeling, the same way you are. For of course, the people who aren't disagreeing with you on something or other, because there's always people who disagree with us on something.
Sure.
But I have to say this. So Kelly Kreiner, our good buddy, my former co-host here on the show, super chat for $5, and he says, Tyler Bagent paid for this donation.
Oh, man.
He's being funny. Also, Kelly did say that the best offensive player that the Raiders had today was the pass interference. So it's pretty accurate. So
go ahead. Please, you. Sorry.
No, I was going to say the Raiders, and that's the thing is you look at this, and all you have to do is look at this, and that is the Raiders are becoming an instant meme and joke around the league because I don't think that they're being prepared well enough for these games. And to your point about, do they make a move? I've been saying all week that I just don't see them firing him unless something drastic happens. I think this is another step, though, because what happened today, Mark Davis, I mean, we saw last year when he got embarrassed, after the Colts loss, that he had conversations with Josh McDaniels after the game in the locker room. We'll see if that bears witness today, if he bears witness again to that, and see if it happens. But to me, this is a situation where you either going to look at it and say, well, I'm just going to ride it out with this guy. Doesn't matter what happens. And at the end of the year, I'll do what I got to do. Or do you say to yourself, boy, I think we can win some games with this team, which I'm not confident they can, Murph, to be honest with you. I would have trouble, just like I did at the beginning of the year, I would have trouble picking the Raiders in any game the remainder of the year unless they show me something that shows some sort of consistency, which they've been unable to do since this guy took over as head coach. So if that's the case, you either make that change now in the hopes that, unfortunately, because of tragedy happened with the Raiders in 2021, or you just ride it out. And for those of you out there who want to, quote unquote, tank it, that's what you'll get.
Yeah, tanking is certainly, I don't think it's a thing in the NFL, and especially talking about a coaching staff that's on a short, leash here. I definitely don't. I mean, they're going to do everything they possibly can to win a football game. But that actually will dovetail into what I remember what you were asking about when it came to the tight end play. Is that so if we've got a coaching staff that and even if there's a security of contract, there's a desperation to string some wins together because we know we have this tougher schedule up and coming.
Right.
So why then would you start Brian Hoyer over Aiden O'Connell when clearly he's deficient at field vision, which is what allows him to not make these passes or at least attempts to the tight ends that are running wide open in the first half, like you were talking about. So again, it all comes back to, I think, a failure of leadership. And in this case, it's to Josh and his evaluation of talent. Like if that's what you thought, if you thought Brian Hoyer was going to give you the best chance to win a football game, like what a failure that is. And if the idea that there is security in contract, well, then why would you not start Aiden O'Connell and give him the ability to put up some numbers, gain some confidence, like find out what you've got in this young man? Look, and listen to Raider Nation. Here's the thing, like wins are going to be at a premium for us this year. So I don't ever want to downplay a loss. But when you're talking about on the road, out of conference, like, all right, like you're going to lose some football games. Well, those are the best ones to lose. You don't want to lose to the Chiefs, the Chargers, or the Donkeys. You certainly don't want to lose inside the conference. You don't want to lose to, teams like the Colts or whatever. You don't want to lose it. You don't lose the Jets, right? Because they're going to be right in there in the mix for a wild card. You want to be able to have that advantage over them. Those are the games you don't want to lose. Losing to a Bears team on the road isn't the end of the world. But in context, it kind of is. You know what I mean? So that's where I look at it like, why didn't we get him out there? Why didn't we get AOC out there? Set him up the same way the Bears set up their young quarterback. And listen, I saw freaking Aiden O'Connell play in the Music City Bowl against the University of Tennessee and throw for like 500 yards and a whole bunch of touchdowns. Listen, ball is ball, man. He's got the ability to freaking do some things with a football. Now let's find out if that's going to translate to the NFL level. But if he's never given that opportunity, I mean, you can only do so much in practice. Instead, you're going to start a guy that's as old as I am. Well, maybe not quite that old, because I'm old. Poor Bengals are like, really? Like, what are we doing? Like that to me, I'll button it up like this. There is a lack of vision for the direction and future of this football team. We are scattered as hell. We are all over. It feels like everything is a Band-Aid. Everything is makeshift, from very key positions on defense to very key positions on offense, including our freaking quarterback, which, oh, by the way, is the most important position in all of team sports. And so when we're like doing this patchwork at these incredibly important positions, that's just, to me, again, that's a lack of vision. You can be the greatest strategist in the world, but if you don't have a vision and if you can't share that with your team, it's...
Yeah, and I know we're not in the building, we're not in the locker room. But if you see that from the outside, what does it look like from the inside, right? By the way, I want to hit up Pineapple B122. I can't see the rest of it on my screen, but anyway, it's a super chat for $10. I want to thank you for your donation to the One Nation Foundation. It says, Murph, after watching your debate with Uncle Mosh, I decided to give McDaniels a chance. After the first quarter, I say fire that jackass. So. he gave you guys a chance. He listened to you, but unfortunately the results didn't follow. So he's ready to get rid of Josh McDaniels. But I think that's the sentiment right now. It's hard to argue against it. I mean, I don't see what the Raiders. You hit on it there. I don't see what the Raiders are doing. My partner Mo Moten, who's doing his live show over at Bleacher Report, he said during the game, the Raiders are showing that they're not serious. He called it unserious, that they're not a serious franchise, that they're not serious about winning. They're not serious about finding their next quarterback. They're not serious about a lot of things. And that's what shows out on the field, and it shows in the front office. Now, I don't know what the front office does outside. I mean, the business side is obviously doing well with finances and all that. That's another thing. But if that doesn't translate on the field, yes, you have your PSL holders, all those people who own the tickets, and you got people out there boycott the team until they fire. Look, the seats are sold. You can boycott all you want. It's not going to do shit. It doesn't do anything. So people calling for a boycott, it's just dumb. So don't do it. But anyway, being angry about your team, though, as a fan, that's perfectly legitimate, and you should be. If I'm a fan of the Raiders and I'm watching what's happening, and I see that the franchise that I support, both with my time and my money and whatever else, is not being serious about building a winner, doesn't have the right organization in place, the right people in place, boy, it's going to chap my ass. And I get it. It makes sense. Let's switch now, Murph, to the defense. We look at the defense coming into this game. Obviously, the last 3 games, good stuff. People will say, it's against a bad team. Well, they faced a bad team today, and they looked probably the worst they've looked since Buffalo. And you see what was happening. The Bears with only backup running backs, okay? Foreman comes out, has 2 rushing touchdowns, a receiving touchdown. They gashed it, and people say, well, they were on the field the whole game. Yes, 100%. That factored at the end. But early on, they were getting run over. They were losing the line of scrimmage to a Bears offensive line that has 2 starters. The rest of them are out. It is one of the thinnest offensive lines in the NFL, and they ran over the Raiders defense. Somebody said Max Crosby didn't have the best game. Well, Max Crosby is not a Superman. He's not going to carry a whole team every game. So and he's probably friggin' tired because he's got to do everything. So that defense to me was really surprising at the beginning of the game. It didn't get better. And of course it wasn't helped because its offense did nothing. So, but it's a huge, if they took 3 steps forward over the last 3 games, they took 5 steps back in this game against the Bears, in my view.
100%. And I agree with you, Scott. I think you made a really critical point there in terms of, as fans of this game and observers of the NFL. If the plan is for your greatest players to always be great and to be perfect, then your plan sucks. Guys are going to have an off day. Devontae had an off day. Devontae, he had those catches early on. No one wants that pass back in that. Oh, and what a concept, by the way. Throw a fade in the end zone to Devontae Adams. Shocker. Thanks for that. Way to adjust, Josh. So no one wants that. That's probably why he didn't catch it, because he was like, oh shit, they're actually throwing one to me back here. So obviously Devontae would want that one back. Max, I think, wants some plays back. But if that's the expectation that your greatest players have to always be perfect, well, then it's not going to be like that. These guys are human beings. They're going to have ups and downs. And when we look back, sometimes when we look back at the greatness of the Raiders, and I'm probably guilty of this as well. I won't hedge it. I'm guilty of this as well. When I look back at the history of this football team and the greatest of the greats, when we look at Timmy Brown and we look at Kenny Stabler and we look at Gene Upshaw and we look at Freddie Biletnikoff, and we like to think that these guys never had a bad game, that they never were off. Well, yeah, they were a lot. Kenny Stabler threw more interceptions than he did touchdowns in his career, but he also, threw in the sea of hands game, right, to win that game, right? Like you can have off games and still win in spite of it, because everyone else around you can step up. Clarence Davis can step up, right? Whatever. Mike Davis can step up. Red Right 88. So there's different moments where the greatest players weren't great, but someone else was there to be great in addition or as well or in place of. And that's what the Raiders have missed forever. Yeah. Forever. So having that dependency on those players to be great, and then to go to your point about them not being serious, this is where I get to that lack of sense of urgency. Why are we not in a bigger hurry, whether it's firing a coach or whether that's on the coach or Dave Ziegler or anybody else, to make a move, to adjust, to change? Why do we not have a bigger sense of urgency around these things? Because as long as we're going to be sitting and where we're at and asking a guy like Devontae and Max to have perfect games against shit football teams in order for us to win, well, then guess what? We're going to win 3 games. And I swear, to the past 2 years, Scott, you think one of these days I'm going to learn my lesson. In the past 2 years, Vegas, not Vegas Raiders, Vegas the city, the books have come out and said the Raiders are a 6-win football team. And I just laugh. Oh my God, you guys are crazy. That's the easiest money I'll ever make, by betting on the Raiders to win more than 6 football games. Nope.
And I picked,
they know what they're doing.
Murph, I picked them to win 7, and I stuck with that this past week. But after today, I don't know that they'll get to 7. I really don't. But it's frustrating, and people are upset, and I get it. And I think that there's nobody who should be more upset than some of the players in that locker room, because they're not the direction. It's sort of like, and it's sort of fitting they're in the desert in Las Vegas because they're kind of wandering in the desert. And where is the path? What path should we be on? What is the goal here? Is the goal, yeah, it's only 7 weeks in, but now you're into week 8. You're almost at the full halfway point of the season. Do you really think the team you've constructed, the team that's played in these 7 games so far, do you think this is a team that can make a run at a championship? The answer, of course, is no to that. So if that's the case, then you have to start thinking without giving up, because you don't give up. I agree with you. The tanking people, I get what you're saying, but that's not what you do. You're professional athletes. But if the case is you don't have a team that's going to make a run, then start seeing what you have so that you can start to put a plan, imagine that, a plan together to build the roster out to become a championship-style squad. And if that's the case, do you get there with Brian Hoyer? The answer is no. Do you get there with some of these other players? No. Now, the defensive backfield, remember, they're banged up there, right? Nate Hobbs is still out. I don't know why he was ever put on IR. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But anyway, they're banged up back there, so you understand Marcus Peters still being back there and the fact that they're still using him. But at the same time, there are other things going on, and they have to get serious. I think that was the best thing that Mo said today, and I really glommed onto it, and I like it. It's going to be my theme for the entire week on Silver and Black today. Also, though, I do want to point out, and I know everybody's in the feeding frenzy on the negativity here, because you should be, because the team has played just brutally and coached brutally. But I will say this, Tyree Wilson had his first sack today.
Yay!
So, and he looked better. I'm not, sack and junk time, whatever you want to say, but his play on the field, and I'll have to watch it once the film's ready, but I felt he had his best game. Now, he should have against a team that was not very good up front, but you saw what happened to the rest of the Raiders defense up front was not good. So that is a good sign. I'm not saying he's all the way there yet, but when I look back at this game, I was trying to find some positives, and to me, that's really the only one that I would mention here on the show, just because it stuck out to me. Everything else kind of went south. But you look ahead, and again, go ahead.
I have a positive for you.
All right.
Hunter Renfrow got a catch.
I said that at the end of the game. I'm like, wait a minute. Aiden O'Connell is the only person in the Raiders building who knows who Hunter Renfrow is.
Unbelievable.
It's the only one.
Garbage time in the fourth quarter. And we finally found the guy that had 103 catches 2 years ago. Oh, my gosh. Unbelievable.
It's crazy. I don't know what's going on there. The last concern I want to bring up here is the fact that, and again, I know some people won't like this, some people will agree, and some people will vehemently disagree, and that's fine. Josh Jacobs just is, you can blame the line all you want, but he also is just not, he's not performing at the level we saw last year. Why? I don't know. I can't tell you why. I'm not an expert in these things. We'll try to get somebody on the show to watch the film and tell us why. If it is 80% the line, or is it 50% the line, 50% him, he's just not hitting the hole. Whatever it is, he's not creating what he used to. Some of it's quarterback play. Again, everything in this league is based on the quarterback play. But I'm concerned with Josh Jacobs. And for all of you who are like, pay the man, I am sure as hell glad that the Raiders made one good decision, and that wasn't to pay him yet. It's not that I have anything against Josh Jacobs. I like him a lot. And as a player goes, I root for him because I think he's a very good back. But it's just not been there so far for him.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think of it like that. That actually is one pretty responsible thing that this front office did, was by not signing him to that. Look, they didn't pick up his fifth-year option for a reason, and it's because when we look at the middle 2 years of Josh Jacobs' performance, it wasn't fantastic, and so they didn't want to pay him all that money. But then the guy goes out there and freaking leads the league in rushing, and so taking nothing away from him in that performance. But there was an inconsistency in his career, and we can be prisoners of recency, Raider Nation. And the last thing that we saw was Josh Jacobs leading the league, and it quickly made everyone forget about the prior 2 years to that, because he had a pretty good rookie year, and then, of course, in that fourth year. So that's the reason he didn't get picked up. And then now it's kind of like we're kind of back to what those middle 2 years were looking like, where we're averaging 3 yards a carry, and things just aren't quite getting there. Like, what is Josh notorious for? That's running through that first contact or making that first guy miss. And we're not seeing that. And so is that, though, a case? And like you said, everything runs through the quarterback. Can you press the line of scrimmage and focus on stopping that run game and getting after Josh Jacobs and putting the quarterback in a position to test you downfield or otherwise in order to find success in the offense. Like, that's a very sound coaching strategy. Okay, well, if that's the case, well, then what do the Raiders have to answer that? Because listen, this league is all about, what are you going to do to answer it? Because you have an answer, they have an answer. You have an answer, they have an answer. It's a back and forth. And clearly the Raiders have been outmatched in their answers for the entirety of Josh McDaniels' career with the team so far.
Yeah, and listen, on the subject of Jacobs, I mentioned it earlier, the offensive line. No question, they're not run blocking like they did last year. But for those of you saying that's the only reason, it's just simply not true. You're not watching the video again after you watch the game live, because when he gets the ball in space, he's not running well either. So that's not to blame the offensive line. The other thing is, he doesn't get as many touches in most instances. Those people are correct, because the Raiders are getting down in games. And what do? They abandon the run. Of course, this offense cannot run without establishing the running game. So that's why it's unable to score points, because it doesn't get the running game established for the various reasons. And then it goes to a passing game, which doesn't seem to be executed well by any of the quarterbacks. So that's where you get into this big mess. But it was just something I wanted to bring up, because it's just not happening. I mean, they talked a lot about it on the broadcast today. It's something we've talked about here on the show for the last few weeks as well. I don't know. That points to something. Is there lingering thoughts from him mentally in his head about the holdout and what happened there? It could be. We don't know. We've seen it with some other running backs around the league that were part of that group, and others not, right? Saquon Barkley had a nice game today for the Giants, who actually won a game. But other than that, it's sort of like, I don't know what's going on there. But that to me is the issue. Now, looking forward, I know people don't want to get over you got to fire the coach thing, and I'm not ruling anything out moving forward, but this team now has to prepare. It has an extra day to prepare to go to Detroit, and if Jimmy Garoppolo is available, he will start. If he's not available, I don't see how this coach could justify starting Brian Hoyer again, and so it's going to be a very interesting week. I think it'll be a contentious week around the facility there with the media, because I think the media, you've seen enough now. I mean, we're getting close to the point of the year, a few more weeks, and you are who you are. And the Raiders have kind of shown who they are through 7 weeks, and barring some sort of massive coming out and just an upset in Detroit, I don't see things getting much better. So I get fans are going to be down. But Murf, you just want to see that the team recognizes the concerns, that the team recognizes the urgency in which they need to figure something out this season.
Yeah, urgency, that's it right there. And, when we were talking about Josh McDaniels last week, and we were talking about, the criticism of him, is what has he done definitively in his head coaching career? What is that like signature like game, right? When you look at, whether it was for Madden, it would have been, winning the AFC Championship in 1976 to finally get past the Steelers, like things like that. You think about, like, what is the definitive moments in coaches' careers? What is the definitive moment in Josh McDaniels' career that would give you any sort of confidence in him? I would say this to you, Raider Nation, that look, if the guy is going to be around, if Mark Davis isn't going to make a move, all right, well, if we beat a Lions team, that's nice, but that's also a Lions team that got smoked today, right? You got the Giants coming up. Like, that should be win for us. But then, like you said, the Giants actually pulled one out. The Jets, who knows what we're going to get with the Jets. So now we're down to the Dolphins. Could the Raiders go on the road against Miami and win? Again, Miami is, I mean, I don't want to say any team is unbeatable, but they look, they're like Chiefs level. Like, that could be we could be looking at a Kansas City, Miami type AFC Championship game. And then, then we've got the Chiefs, a couple of times in there as well. So I look on the schedule and I look to see, is there anything on here that could be signature, that could give us hope, that could, and I see you, Ronan, don't you give me hope. Like, you know what I mean? So, like, is there anything on here that could give? That's the only thing I can point to, because Scott, the season is, I don't want to say the season is over. And I don't want to say that because I have respect for the players, and I don't want to ever play down their commitment to, doing their thing. They are professionals, and for the most part, everyone's going to continue to bring it through all 17 weeks. And so I don't ever want to play that down. That said, I don't know what this team has to play for at this point after this losing to one of the worst teams in the NFL. So it's only going to take a win against the Chiefs, a win against the Dolphins that would not only inspire potentially them, but I think us as fans and for folks like you, Scott, in the media, like otherwise, like it's just kind of like, well, all right, this is kind of over now. The Raiders have relieved us from the burden of expectation from this one.
Well, and that's the thing. You look at how the Raiders finished poorly last year. Okay, they just did. And so now you have an opportunity at sitting where you are now, and not being at 3-4 through 7 weeks. You know, the playoffs is a far off thing, but what you can do is, to your point, is you can start to turn things around. I know no one out there has faith that it will happen under the current coach. I get that. But I'm just saying from a hypothetical standpoint, what you want as a fan, in my view, if they switch coaches or if they don't switch coaches, what you want to see is you want to see them start to get better at things and start to look like they're better prepared, that they have a better game plan. And I know that includes coaching. So you want to see that happen. And hey, you don't make the playoffs, but if you can end the season, if you can go the second half of the season looking better than you did the first half of the season, maybe you win a game here that you don't expect. And you're talking about signature wins like going to Miami, which to me seems like them trying to climb Mount Everest on a Schwinn bicycle. I don't know, but I do think that's what you have to look for. Because I understand fans want to care and they want to see something that they can feel good about. And after today, it's hard to see what could possibly come good from the situation, but there's always a chance that happens. And for those of you who say there's no chance of anything, I get it. I'm just not that much of a pessimist in life, period. So I try to always keep a glass half full. But in this case, look, there's got to be some kind of change on this team. I don't know what it is. I think there might be something after this game. It's a bad loss. Does a coach get let go? And I'm not talking about head coach. Does a coordinator, does a Graham, does somebody get let go? I don't know. This kind of Patriots mentality of you're going to bunker down and be loyal to whoever you're loyal to has gone on. We saw it with John Gruden too, with some defensive coordinators. So I'm not going to just single out those guys because it's happened with the Raiders before. And so we'll see what happens. But I do think that there's got to be some recognition. And of course, the press conference has already happened. I'm going to go back and watch it when we're done here. But you want to see at least that this coaching staff realizes that there's something not right here, and you can't just continue to do the same things you've been doing.
Yeah, well, I think your point about coming up onto the second half of the season is that like one of the ultimate indictments of a failed coaching regime is regression, right? And the Raiders have done nothing but have gone backwards since that loss, against the Bengals in the playoffs. And so this team has been sliding down ever since. And so if they do pull off one of these, say, signature wins and or string together something positive going into the offseason, that's, you think about back to, like, for those of you that are, been around a minute, you think about Gruden 1.0. I think about that 1999 season where the Raiders, they strung together some wins. We ended the season in Kansas City, knocking the Chiefs out of the playoffs, and rest in peace, Darrell Russell walking off the field said, yeah, we going home, but they going home too. There was a lot of optimism around the Raiders because of where it was like where this thing was going to go. And so can Josh McDaniels and this coaching staff pull that together? Can they pull this thing together to give us something optimistic about? Because outside of that, Scott, I'm with you. It's other than that, it's been nothing but regression. And so, that gets you fired. That's the end,
Yeah. And before we go, because we're coming up on the end of the show here, we go, a couple of things that came in the chat that I want to react to. One was, and I don't know if it was a joke, it might have been, but sometimes people are serious. Bring back Gruden. Remember, part of the reason the Raiders are in the position they are right now is because John Gruden screwed the draft. You had so much draft capital and it didn't deliver except for one or two players. So that's number one. Number two is this idea that the Raiders somehow can get better this season with the quarterbacks they have. I just don't see it. Even if Aiden O'Connell goes in there, I'm all for it. I'm all for just letting him make his mistakes, see what he does. I just don't see anything going that direction. I don't see anything happening there, but I wanted to just call that out before we go. Murph, before we go, a couple minutes left. Let everybody know, of course, we talked about the super chats, and thank you for all of you who donated today. It goes to the One Nation Foundation. Murph, as always, tell people about the One Nation Foundation, what you do, how they can get in touch with you. And also don't forget to follow Murph on x.com at _Murph with an F, and also follow them on YouTube because it's a great show.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. So once we figured out that we could make some money with Raiders Fan Radio, we quickly decided that we wanted to give all that money away. And so we give it to various Raiders related charities, including the Bolitnikoff Foundation. Shout out Fred Bolitnikoff, the absolute legend. Can't wait to see him here in a couple weeks when the Raiders Fan Radio crew will be in Vegas at their annual Crab Fest. And we are going to present them a check for $15,000 that you all helped raise. It's 100% Raider Nation, 100% our listening audience. Thank you to all the good folks here on Silver and Black today. Scott and Mo with donating all the super chats, and then everybody that is in the super chat. And I can't see the chat, but know that I always go back and read it. And I love you guys, and thank you so much for what you do to support the foundation. We always, when we present that check, always make sure that we tell them this is from the listening audience. This is from Raider Nation. We're just the vessels. We're just the folks with microphones, that like to hang out in a bonus room and talk about our favorite football team. It is you, Raider Nation, the ones that make this thing happen. And we are just so thankful to represent that and your generosity. And so we're looking forward to giving that. So if you want to support the One Nation Foundation, you can do it a multitude of ways. You can buy merch. You can buy shirts at our TeePublic site. You can donate directly at onenationfoundation.net. You can do super chats. We do raffles throughout the course of the year. And even if you're not able to contribute monetarily, we just ask that you hit a like, hit a subscribe, support the Scott and Mo here at Silver and Black today, support Raiders Fan Radio, because that generates advertising opportunities for us all. And those advertisers, like the good folks at Manscaped, are the ones that are going to help us raise money every year. Also, we have corporate sponsors now like United Rentals. Shout out Will Compton, bussing with the boys, hooking us up with a big donation this year. We can't thank the boy enough. So just those we don't get to those opportunities without your support, Raider Nation, because without eyeballs and without the thumbs ups and the subscribes and all that kind of stuff, we don't get to those things. So it's not about raising our shows up. It's about lifting up the foundation. And we can't do that without your support. So thank you guys very, very much. And Scott, thank you so much. We love you, man. You've done such wonders for our foundation and our where we were, a year and a half ago, based on where we're at now and where we're going to be next year. We don't do that without your help. And so thank you so much for that.
Oh, it's my pleasure to do it. I mean, you guys do such great work. You, Jeff and Michelle, Uncle Mosh, everybody over at Raiders Fan Radio is great. And I know this sounds like a love fest because it is, because you're doing great work. And I wish I could tell people we're still working on that really big project that we hopefully will get done for next year for the foundation, which is going to be fun. I wish I could tell people today about it, but it's going to be super duper. By the way, shout out to Raider Worm, $2, says, thanks for the therapy, guys. So I'm glad we could be here for everybody. Murph, my man, thank you so much. Are you guys doing your post-game show today too, or no?
No. Ain't nobody want to talk about this.
No. Okay. So catch Murph and the gang on Wednesdays. It's 4 p.m. Pacific, right?
Yes, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, youtube.com/Raiders Fan Radio, or you could find us on any audio podcast service.
There you go. Make sure you subscribe. Thanks, my friend. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Good night, Raider Nation.
All right. There you go. As always, thanks to Murph for being along with us, and thanks to you guys for being with us. I know a tough one for fans out there, and I can understand why, and I don't disagree with a lot of the opinions we saw in the chat. And of course, we heard from Murph today. Do me a favor. Also, please subscribe here on YouTube. If you're watching us live, or if you're on Twitter, wherever you are, make sure you subscribe to the channel, put on that notifications bell. We appreciate that very much. And also subscribe to our audio podcast, which of course, happens all week, every week. And this week, Mo and I will be back with 3 or 4 shows as usual, and some guests to talk about what's going on with the Raiders. And Tuesday's show should obviously be a doozy, as Mo joins me back to talk about this one and the direction ahead for the Raiders. For our producer, Mike Robier at Odyssey, we appreciate his help, as always, on putting the show together. For Murph, I am Scott Gubransen. This has been Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. Take care. Have a great rest of your weekend, Raider Nation.